You're tuned into the Growth Ceilings podcast, the show for builders, dreamers, and leaders ready to break limits and grow beyond what they thought possible.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Growth Ceilings podcast. My name is Jim Lovelady, professional EOS implementer. EOS is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Today, I'm joined by Jason Voiovich. He's a fractional chief marketing officer, author, and innovation historian who's helped organizations generate more than $500 million in new product revenue. Jason has written 3 books, including Marketer in Chief, another called Bullfrogs, Bingo, and The Little House on the Prairie, where he uncovers the lessons innovators learned during some of the toughest times in history. And he's also written a book called Booze, Babe, and the Little Black Dress. Jason and I met last month at the Naples Tech Meetup, and I'm excited to dive into how his Jaywalker mindset helps leaders move from stuck to unstoppable. Hello, Jason, and welcome.
Jim, it's good to be here. I'm really excited to talk with you today. It's a lot of fun.
Fantastic. So I was fascinated for the few minutes we got to chat at the networking event, the Naples Tech Meetup. It was definitely a privilege to meet you, and I'm excited to have you here. Tell us a little bit about your background, what brought you to this point, and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, no, I'm like you said, I'm a fractional CMO. But I have been in the marketing business and advertising business since I was about 4 years old. My dad was one of the original madmen in Chicago and Minneapolis in the 1960s, 1970s. So I grew up on photo shoots. I would go to logo design, brochures, all sorts of things. I met all the big brands of the day. I was kind of in the corner and told to shut up, but it was just fun to, I grew up thinking that new product development, entrepreneurship, new ventures, innovation, making something happen like that. I grew up thinking that was normal. Like that was what all dads did. That's just what you did. That's how things worked. And it was a little bit of a shock to me as I got into my professional career that most other people didn't have that experience. They didn't think that way. So I had kind of an engineering job as kind of my first job in fiber optics and product management. It wasn't long before I started my own agency with a business partner. I did a little bit of, I was a chief customer officer and chief marketing officer at some product development organizations. And then about 8 years ago, I decided to become a fractional CMO to give me more flexibility to do things like author books and come up with new things and do what I wanted to do, start new ventures and some of my own new companies. So I do a lot of different things, but mostly what I like to do is I like to use lessons that I learned from my dad, from my grandparents who came over from Cuba, that kind of entrepreneurship and that grit, and figure out how to get companies unstuck. A lot of people are stuck in their marketing right now. They don't know what to do. There's a lot of uncertainty. And I can take all of that background from all of that research and all of that experience and help give people the confidence to move forward, take appropriate risks, and get across the street.
So one of the things I learned about you, you have a framework that you call the Jaywalker Mindset, which essentially is helping leaders intentionally break from convention to create meaningful innovation. Explain what that's all about and how that helps entrepreneurs and business owners.
I think that the innovation and marketing and new product development process, there's so many resources out there. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're a new business owner, it gets overwhelming in a hurry. It's just so complicated. And really, I created the Jaywalker Mindset after researching hundreds of historical innovators and my own personal experience with them. I just noticed that they shared certain characteristics. They're very observant people. They don't just run out with something. They're very thoughtful, they're observant, they're careful, they understand their market, they understand the problem. They also really understand their customer well. They know what the objective that they're going for is. They're crystal clear about that. And the third part is they understand how to take risks. They know that, like, hey, there's no perfect answer out there. But once you start to move, you better move. Otherwise, you're going to get crushed. Someone's going to get you. Speed is of the essence. So the Jaywalker mindset is essentially that in a nutshell. When you think about, hey, I'm on one side of the street, that represents everything you're doing. Hey, what are my capabilities? What is my team? What is my IP? What is my funding? All those things you've got to make sure that you've got ready to go. The other side of the street is what your customer needs. Is it about them that's critical? What are they going to buy? What's the defensible position on the other side of the street that you can kind of make a name for yourself over there? The road represents the gap between kind of point A and point B, and the traffic along the way that, if you are not careful, will kill you. So most innovators and most people who are thinking about that kind of think about the crosswalk, right? Like, okay, well, there's a light. I'm going to go to the crosswalk. I'm going to wait. The problem is that's where everyone's going. If you're a startup, you're trying to make something different, you have to get from point A to point B the fastest possible way. You need to jaywalk. Well, I use that metaphor because everyone sort of understands it. They understand that, okay, I can't be too burdened down. I can't carry along 50 people for my organization. I got to move fast. I better know where I'm going. I better know how fast I'm going. I better watch the traffic. And when I'm ready to move, I better move fast. But it's still risky, right? It's a great metaphor for the innovation process in a nutshell. And everyone, once they hear it, they're like, I get it. Let's learn a little bit more about how we actually do that in practice. But I like it that any business owner, you've got someone who's an engineer or a finance person, I get it. It isn't really that complicated. It's kind of like playing chess, right? The rules are easy, mastering it's hard.
So you're describing innovation as jaywalking, the observing, the choosing, the acting. In EOS, we talk about clarity and traction. I'm curious where you see structure helping or hurting innovation.
I think from an EOS perspective, what I've always liked about EOS generally is that if you're on an innovation mission, you absolutely have to have crystal clarity on who you are, what makes you tick, your business systems, all of that. Before you get out there and start to run, you don't want to find out that you start to run, but you're kind of hampered by something along the way and it's slowing you down. Because you slow down in the middle of the street and the bus is going to hit you. Like you need to have your business well in hand before you decide to kind of run. And what I find in innovation efforts very often is you have a problem with one of the three aspects, right? You have a problem understanding the customer. That's very common. People think they understand the customer, but very often have only a surface level understanding. They're misunderstanding the traffic patterns. Like they don't understand their competition. They don't understand the regulatory environment. So they need to kind of watch the traffic before they just run. But very often the hidden one in what EOS, I think, represents and addresses very, very well is most organizations don't understand themselves. They don't understand their own capabilities and, frankly, their own blind spots. Where, if I run out into the street and I haven't protected my IP, or I don't know, I don't have a good handle on my supply chain, or I don't understand what my financial status is, I don't know where my line of credit's at right now. You run out in the street and all of a sudden your CFO says, hey, Jim, you better stop. You've run out of cash runway and you're right in the middle of the street, right in front of the city bus that's coming.
Yes.
Yeah, you're just going to get run over. How many times have I seen organizations launching a new product, they're right in the middle of doing it, and they run out of cash? If you don't understand where you're at and you're done, you might as well not even start. You have to do that first before you engage in an innovation effort. You absolutely must understand your business processes better be in good shape. You better understand. And EOS is one of the only ways I found for, small organizations to get a handle on that and actually have confidence moving out.
So in my research of you, you're known for some key themes in your book, Marketer in Chief. You analyze how each U.S. president sold the American idea. And I've kind of referenced this as presidential marketing. Explain that a little bit.
I think what, I am a historian as well as, I'm an amateur historian, of course. I wrote the book not as a professional historian would take it. I wrote it from a marketer's perspective. And as I was reading, I love reading history books. And one of the things that frustrated me about them is they're great history, but they don't really understand the business process because most historians are not business people. They don't really get how it works. They have trouble understanding, they have trouble communicating what was really going on behind the scenes. And often there's some, I wouldn't say misinterpretations, but just incomplete interpretations. So what Marketer in Chief is I take a look at each of the 47 presidencies, not just the popular ones, not just the cool ones. We look at each one and how the American idea, the innovation that was the United States of America back in 1776, it is an innovation. There wasn't anything like it before. How that has progressed and evolved over time. So over that time, you can see kind of that early adopter through majority, through late majority, that entire life cycle happening as told by each president in the situation they faced. So it's basically a marketing masterclass design disguised as a history book. I think for marketing and communications people, I mean, gosh, what an invaluable resource. You've got 47 examples of the toughest situations in the world that you have to solve and how they did it or failed to.
So you talk about being a historian, and it's a thrilling set of books that you've produced. You talk about innovation from history, lessons from the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression that apply to today's business cycles. Give us a little insight on that.
I think when most people think about, what is the modern, marketing and sales and kind of business development world, and they'll kind of look back like, well, the age of the internet, or maybe, the last 25 years and how things have changed. But what's interesting is one of the books I reference in Booze, Babe, and the Little Black Dress, that's a book about innovation in the 1920s, was Ralph Starr Butler wrote a book called Marketing Methods in 1917. And when you read that book, and you can find it digitized on the Internet Archive right now, you read the book, it's kind of marketing 101. You would be shocked at how modern that is. That if you just changed a few of the words here and there, what he's talking about in 1917 was just as relevant 100 years later. And he was one of the first people that actually wrote down and formally trained some of the first generation of marketers, which led to, like, those are the people who graduated from his university courses and went on to run the companies in the 90s. The Fords, General Motors, Frigidaire, all of these companies that got their start during the 90s were products of that training. And so our modern world, the modern world we inhabit as consumers and as people trying to sell things to consumers, was created then. And most people think like, oh, well, maybe that's the 1950s, but really it starts earlier than that. And what we learn from there is not only directly applicable, but these are lessons that we can take back and we can learn from people who had to struggle through the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression. When we think like, hey, things are in a bubble right now, or things are really bad right now, that ain't nothing compared to what happened then.
So compare one of those Great Depression innovators to a modern founder. Help me understand how they relate or perhaps not relate.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about founders during the Great Depression, during some of those really tough times, and let's kind of maybe compare founders during the Great Depression to founders during the Great Recession, basically 100, 90 years later or something like that.
Right.
What you discover is that the market opened up for people that aren't typically thought of as innovators. For instance, we had, Richard Drew at 3M, and 3M was not 3M back then. It was Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, this tiny little nothing company on the North Shore of Lake Superior. And he essentially invented Scotch tape. And by the end of the 1930s, 3M had moved, sold billions of dollars in today's money in tape, and had become on its way to a global powerhouse in the decades to come. Compare that kind of fast forward to the folks who created Uber, Airbnb, these kind of places where people who would not ordinarily get this opportunity in this down market. Think about starting at Airbnb during the Great Recession. Real estate prices are in the tank. You get these guys who saw an opportunity. You know what? We could rent out a spare room, and make something happen there. And how many of us have stayed in a VRBO or an Airbnb in the past 10 years? These bad times tend to be catalysts for, necessity is the mother of invention. And we see it again and again. So people get afraid of, bust times. They're really afraid of like, hey, well, what happens if the AI bubble bursts and things go really bad for a while? I would say that's going to be one of the best times to innovate as a person who is not in the Silicon Valley infrastructure or not like connected with OpenAI or Microsoft. It's during those down times when you can really make a go as a small kind of independent or kind of a mid-sized innovator.
So, from your perspective, why do most innovation strategies fail?
Wow, that is a loaded question. I think it all comes down to one of the three major reasons, that I highlighted with the Jaywalker method, that I don't know, there's something wrong with my own business. Either I run out of cash, I don't have the talent on the team, I don't have IP protection, whatever the case may be. I don't have the systems in place to support the success. I think a lot of times people talk about how like failure. They talk about like, well, I didn't have product market fit. I find just as often innovators don't plan for success. They don't plan that, hey, this thing takes off, and they have no clue how to scale up, their success. And they just haven't really thought about it in the same way. They don't know, they don't have the business systems to be able to go beyond their own, kind of their own capabilities. I find just as often people don't understand their customer. They've got kind of a surface level understanding of the customer. And I see it again and again where, okay, I'm hearing a pitch. You and I have both heard plenty of pitches. And some of those pitches, what they don't know when people pitch me, I go out before I talk with them about being a fractional CMO, and certainly before there's any investment, I go out and talk with their customers. And I discover that I'm often the first person who's actually talked with one of their customers, which blows me away. Just said, I just called them up and I asked. And you discover really fast how they kind of have what I now euphemistically call kind of a ChatGPT understanding of their customer, which is not good enough. And third big reason is they get crushed in the market somewhere. They don't understand large company competitors. They don't understand the smaller companies. They don't know who they are. They don't understand the startups who are also vying for the same space, or they have a regulatory. I did a lot of work in Minnesota on medical device startups, and I can't tell you how many of them just did not really understand what the clearance process meant, how long it would take, and how difficult it really can be. So one of those three reasons, I don't know myself, I don't know my customer, and I don't know what's in between those two. In my view, I can boil down root cause of failure to one of those three.
Yeah, in fact, when you and I met, we were attending the Naples Tech Meetup. There were presentations. There were 5 presentations kind of put on speed dial, and each entrepreneur had the opportunity to articulate who they were, what they're doing, what their solution produces or performs. And it was clear to me, and I think you shared the same opinion when we were together. There was one that rose above the other 4, and it stood out from my perspective based on innovation, based on preparation, based on a solution that made sense for the marketplace. It was clear to understand. And I thought it was a very well done presentation without going into the details. So you said something a few moments ago. I think entrepreneurs, especially early stage entrepreneurs, are often in a race. We're using all these other metaphors. They're in a race to get to market. Sometimes they don't understand their customer. Sometimes they may not have the right people on the team. Sometimes they're not funded. There's a myriad of things that come up or come to mind when it comes to that. The one thing that stands out to me is that business operating system. You're familiar with EOS. I find I've only been doing this for a little under 2 years. I was a customer prior to that. But as an implementer, I've discovered quickly that there seems to be a point where people actually have to feel pain before they realize, hey, I need to put a business operating system in place. And maybe I'm kind of giving away the answer before I ask you the question, but from your perspective, from what you've seen in all of your experience, when is the right time for an entrepreneur, a business owner, a founder to establish a business operating for where they're going?
Yeah, there are kind of two answers to that. One is kind of the answer you should do, and one is the answer that you will do. And I'll start with the one you will do is when you run out into the street and you get hit by a car and you pick yourself back up the road, you waddle back to your side, and you realize, I don't want that to happen again. What do I do? You experience some sort of failure, either a quality issue, one of your salespeople picks up and leaves with 10 of your customers, or whatever the case may be. You had pain. Pain motivates people. I'm in marketing. Both you and I have that background, Jim. Pain motivates better than success. So I got it. That's probably what you will do. But I wouldn't be doing my job and you wouldn't be doing yours if I didn't say, well, what should you do? My experience is as soon as you understand you need business systems in place, as soon as you've kind of caught product market fit, that you understand like, hey, this is who we are, this is what we're selling, this is how we're different from the competition, you've got the match, and you might only be able to do it at small scale, but if you don't have business systems, you will never stop. And I see a lot of businesses, frankly, businesses that have been around for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And they are, they grew and then they just plateaued.
Yes.
And sometimes that's on purpose. Like, hey, the founders say, this is all we kind of want. This provides their lifestyle businesses. That's great. Uh, or those that want to grow and they can't grow. And I would say business processes, EOS is critical for both of them for different reasons. One, if you've plateaued and that's where you want to be, do you really want to be spending 80 hours in the business, or would you rather spend 20 hours in the business? So with good systems, can make sure you have a repeatable, sustainable business that actually takes a lot less time and effort to run. That'd be great. So that's a great value proposition. But if you want to grow, you just simply can't. You can't spend, I'm spending 80 hours now. I want to double. I'm going to spend 160. Come on. That's not realistic. And unless you have scalable systems, you will just, you won't get to spending 160 hours isn't going to get you 2x the revenue. It'll probably get you 0.9 the revenue because you'll be so burnt out.
You are going right where I was going to take you. And that is, I come from a sales and marketing background prior to becoming an implementer. And I think that entrepreneurs and business owners often make the mistake of saying, oh, sell more, run faster, run faster. And you're kind of alluding to the number of hours, and you're absolutely right. And they don't stop and really check themselves and be open and honest with themselves and with the leadership teams that they manage to say that we need to put our business into an operating system that's going to create traction, visibility, accountability, and discipline within the business. Then you'll take off from there. I see people oftentimes they'll say, oh, we got to run out and market more or sell more or both. And they end up making the same mistake at a larger clip, or it costs them more money along the way. That's good for business for fractionals like you and I. I come from fractional chief revenue officer, you're fractional chief marketing officer, but I would argue that if you don't have a sound operating system, as I've learned, then you're probably wasting your time and money, and you're going to be disappointed with the results long term.
Yeah, the metaphor I use is, if you're driving along at 10 miles an hour and you're kind of headed towards a brick wall, and I give you gas, which is like marketing and sales, you're going to hit that wall at 30 miles an hour, not 10. And make sure that you install a steering wheel in the car to turn away from that before I put gas in the car. So a lot of times, frankly, that I'll be speaking with organizations who approach me about like, hey, I want to kind of take the business to the next level. Marketing is the answer to do that because marketing is growth. Got it. We want this kind of long-term trajectory. And I spend some time asking them about, are they ready for that success? We've talked about this before. If we are successful, can you handle that? And if there is no business system in place, there's no EOS,
Right.
there's no
Right.
comparable model, it's almost like the worst thing you could do would be to hire me. That would be a huge mistake because I will help you grow and you will fall flat on your face as soon as that starts to happen. And that's not what I want. I mean, I would rather have them, bring me as an advisor, make sure to kind of stay out of the ditch while you are getting your business processes set so that you are ready for growth. Most organizations I find just are simply not ready to scale in their current form.
So when you're talking to companies, when we're out networking, and I expect to see you more often in the months and weeks to come, as you're talking to potential fits with being a fractional CMO, who's the perfect prospect for you?
Yeah, the my typical client, it falls into one of two categories. They're either growing or ready to grow quickly, for their own reasons, or they're stuck. Their marketing is stuck. They've plateaued. It's one of those two things almost always. I do work with startups on occasion. They usually need to be funded because I have found that, startups that are bootstrapping are not funded yet, may not be ready to invest in marketing. It's just they haven't found product market fit yet, and they just aren't able to take advantage of what we're doing. So most organizations tend to be a little bit more established. They tend to be kind of ready. Frankly, they're ready for EOS, or they've implemented EOS, or they're in that process. That's why there's a lot of synergy, and why I tend to look for clients who, it's one of the first questions I ask is, what's your business operating system? And if they don't have an answer, I have to ask a lot more questions. If they say, I have EOS, I'd say, okay, great. Do you have an implementer, or are you implementing it yourself? And if they say, no, we have an implementer, then I say, okay, we can have a talk, because I know that talk will be constructive. In practical terms, depending on the industry, usually those are anywhere from, they might be at 10 million, but usually they're a little bit higher than that. And I tend not to work with clients that are larger than $500 million, because those clients tend to need full-time CMOs and should have a full-time CMO. I can help coach them and advise them along the way, but they should really be hiring full-time staff. So that's the EOS is a big part of my business development strategy, because it helps me qualify companies that are ready to take advantage of what I'm doing.
How long have you been here in Naples?
Just about, I want to say, I think this is coming up on 2 years right now.
Fantastic. So you may share the same optimistic view that I have. I was stunned by the sheer amount of service businesses between Cape Coral down to Marco Island. It's incredible how many businesses are here, how many smaller teams are here. And I'm talking about companies that have maybe, an owner, an entrepreneur, and they have 1 to 15 employees. It may be below that line you were just describing a few moments ago, but from my perspective, it's an underserved market that is in dire need of services like fractional experience, like yourself, fractional chief marketing officer, fractional sales officer, fractional operating officer. Pick the expertise. And what they're also lacking is a structure and the tools to help them organize their business so they can find the right people. They can articulate a vision. They can now use data in their business in a way that helps them for both short-term and long-term predicting, helps them to identify trends in their business. And then essentially, as they start to grow and get a little bit more complex, how do they document their processes to get as much repetition and desired outcome on a repeatable basis? How do we solve problems as a leadership team, and teaching those principles to entrepreneurs who are up and coming, and then finally getting traction in the business? And so I'm kind of going all over the wheel of the 6 components of EOS, but I see an appetite for the tools and really for the experience there's a lot of up and coming businesses in this area that need both of our expertise and experience. And I think you've hit upon a bunch of themes already today that hopefully the listeners are picking up on. And if they want to learn more, they'll reach out to one or both of us and engage us in further conversation. So in closing today, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, is there anything you want to share about your existing books and perhaps some new upcoming titles or revisions to any one of your titles?
Yeah, that's I find that a lot of the folks that I meet here in the Naples area are I see, picking up on what you said, I see the economy diversifying quickly, not only service businesses, but new tech businesses, new manufacturing businesses. There's a ton of capital down here from, all the way from Minnesota, Ohio, Indiana, New York, New Jersey, all of that, Canada, coming down and filtering into this area. And the entrepreneurship community is starting to kind of take advantage of that and really professionalize. Even in the last 2 years, I've seen a marked improvement in the quality of the pitches that I've seen and the quality of the organizations. I think they are ready for that next level of professionalism. So I'm excited for that. For me, there are a lot of people down here that near and dear to my heart love history and kind of love books and love reading. On November 11th, which is this next week from when we're recording this, I'm launching the re-releasing Marketer in Chief as a second edition. That'll be available on paperback and ebook on Amazon, so you'll be able to find that there. And then I am working on, probably for release in 2027, a book on innovation in the 1940s, kind of capping off a trilogy of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and kind of innovation stories and inspiration for those three really pivotal decades in American history between the two world wars. So very exciting coming up for sure. And you can learn about all of that. My website is really easy. I kept it really easy. It's just myname.com, jasonvoiovich.com. I'm the only one. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, and you can connect with me there.
So I turned my camera on purpose. I recall you're from Minnesota, correct?
I am, yes.
I'm from Michigan. I'm a huge Detroit Lions fan, and unfortunately, the Lions got knocked off yesterday by the Minnesota Vikings. So I kind of winced before I got on the call with you here today. And you see the bobbleheads here.
My dad was a huge Lions fan. He grew up in in Minnesota, Chicago, and think, well, is he a Bears fan? Is he a Vikings fan? No, he was a contrarian. He just loved it that no one in Minneapolis and Chicago, everyone hated the Lions. So he was a Lions fan. And so every time it's a special place in my heart for the Lions, and always wish them the best. And it's always tough when the Vikings are playing the Lions, but as long as they beat the Packers, no problem.
Well, I will say my entire life, the Lions have been less than stellar, and they had one playoff win for the majority of my life until 5 years ago. The daughter of the deceased owner, William Clay Ford, his daughter took over the team in 2020. And what did she do? She put the right people in the right seats. And she started with Brad Holmes, the general manager, and Dan Campbell, the head coach. They developed their core values. They use those core values for who they draft, who they waive, how they evaluate players, how they even give accolades at the end of a win, which didn't happen yesterday, but when they give out game balls, oftentimes Dan Campbell will connect the core values of the Detroit Lions to that, and the entire organization has been transformed. And that kind of cultural impact has a huge impact long term, and I'm really pleased to see what they're doing. It's been very exciting. If any of our listeners want to learn more about any of Jason's books, or even the book that I've got here called Traction, written by Gina Wickman, this is the playbook for EOS. Talks about the 6 components of a business, starting with vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction. That's what I teach. I teach tools that are simple and help leadership teams, business ownership, get on the same page, define where you're going, how you're going to get there, and to really make the business healthy. So it's been a fantastic experience, both as a customer prior to becoming an implementer, and now almost 2 years in as an implementer. I've had a lot of fun helping entrepreneurs and business owners. Jason, I believe our paths are going to cross quite a few times. And now that we know each other a little bit better, this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I want to thank you for your time and for your generosity. And I will look forward to sharing this with not only yourself, but our audience. People can take a listen and follow up on reading your books and learning more from all the themes and perspectives you share. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Jim. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And you have a great one, and we'll talk to you soon.
You've been watching the Growth Ceilings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ready to grow.